Hey everyone, welcome back to another Mondays with Melissa. Today I'm just going to tell you two stories that are real life stories that have happened in my household in the last few weeks that are learning opportunities. And I just really try hard to be authentic and real with you all and make sure that you all know I still struggle too. And there are still things that happen to us that we learn from every single day. And it's really about the mindset of, but am I trying to learn and grow and do better? Or am I just going to be stuck in my ways? And so I have two stories I'm going to share with you. So it's kind of story time. If you want to grab yourself some coffee and cookies and popcorn, and I can share these stories with you. So the first story is actually more about my anxiety. So we went on a trip to Oregon over spring break. It was beautiful. It was so much fun. We lucked out and got gorgeous weather. It barely rained the whole time we were there. And there was one day where we went to Pacific City, I believe is what it's called. And there's this giant sand dune, like giant. And it's pretty popular. People like to try and climb to the top of it. And there's a shorter, or not a shorter, a longer path that doesn't go straight up, or you can just run straight up the side of the sand dune. And I decided that I was going to go with my kids and we were going to go straight up the side of the sand dune. So they took off running, they were way ahead, and I just was kind of like steadily going, and it felt great. And I was like, yes, I'm doing this. And I got about three-quarters of the way up, and I realized how high I was because one of my kids was kind of off to one side. And I went to look over at her and I started to feel dizzy. So I realized, like, okay, I'm really high, but I'm like three-quarters of the way here. And so I decided to keep pushing forward. And so I got up to the top. One of my daughters was already up there. So she was up there with my niece. And I got up to the top and I immediately was like dizzy. I felt my heart racing, which here's the thing, you guys. My heart was probably pounding fast because that was a lot of exercise. I was exerting a lot of energy to get up the side of this sand dune, right? Even if I was in my best health, that still would have done that. And so my body felt my heart racing, and I was afraid of how high I was, how I didn't like that I was starting to feel dizzy because it made me start to think of what if I'm going to get vertigo? So there's these like physical symptoms that I'm having, but then like also internal, it was triggering a panic attack in me. And so I started to feel it coming on, and I just knew that I had to get down. And so I don't even remember. I think it was my daughter and my niece, hey, I got to get down. And so my niece took me over to the path that was like longer, but not as straight up. And in that moment, all I could see was it went straight off the edge. And so I was like, absolutely not. And I started to try and go back down where I came from. That freaked me out. So my nephew was like, no, 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 you're fine. Just come here, I'll show you. And so he brought me over to the path, and I was able to safely get down to solid ground. So that's what happened. However, by the time I got down to solid ground, my legs were shaking. My heart rate was still super fast. My breathing was labored. And I would not say I was having a full on panic attack, but I definitely was on the path to that. And so I was going to walk out on this like nice flat path that went out and looked over the ocean with my mom and my sister. And I quickly realized, like, nope, I am like not getting any better. I need to go sit down. So I went down and I sat on the beach, and I was having a panic attack by that point. And so I sat down, and here's the part that was really cool for me, that this is why I wanted to share it with you, is in the past, I don't think I would have recognized that was a panic attack, and I probably would have kept spiraling. I would have started to breathe even faster, even harder. I would have started to panic about, why am I not calming down? I would have started to panic about feeling dizzy. Am I getting vertigo? Because that can take me out for days. And I was able to be in a state of mind where I recognized what was happening. I was in tune with what was happening in my body, and I was able to do strategies that I know that can take that away. So the first thing I tried was laying on my right side, which I have found helps me to calm down when I'm either feeling a little bit panicky, anxious, or even dizzy. And so I laid down on my right side and I closed my eyes. I breathed in through my nose, out through my mouth, and I just laid there for a while. And I felt myself calming down a little bit, but it still wasn't great. So then I decided I was going to sit up. And all of a sudden it came to me like I just learned all these things about the polyvagal theory and the safe and sound protocol. And so I had prior to this was breathing. I was laying on my side. I was doing this other breathing technique that I learned from my therapist, which is you plug one side of your nostril, breathe in through the side that's open, hold it, and then plug the other nostril and breathe out through the side that's open. Trying that, nothing was really working. So then again, safe and sound protocol, polyvagal theory pops into my head. And I do these two things that ultimately were what were able to bring my heart rate down, and my nervous system was able to calm down, and I was able to move on with my day. So here's the two things that I did. The first one was I kind of started to massage my ears. So I started by, if you're watching this on video, you can watch. I'm going to do my best to explain what I'm doing here, but I started by massaging kind of the upper ear, the cartilage. So I grabbed the back of my ear and then put my thumb into the upper cartilage there. And I just started rubbing around, and I was paying attention to what it felt like. I was paying attention to what it felt like to have my skin move around over the cartilage. And I was just breathing as I was doing this. Then I moved down and I kind of like pinched my earlobes and kind of like pinched and wiggled, right? Pinched and wiggled, moved around, moved back up a little bit, back down. And then I was able to put my finger inside my ear, not in the hole, but just right inside the lower part of my ear. And again, kind of rubbed around. I was paying attention to what that felt like as I was pushing in there against the back of my head. Just kind of paying attention to the feelings, the sounds, and just giving myself a little ear massage. So I started with that, and I noticed that that was helping. And so then I moved to the next stretch. And so what this is you just are looking straight ahead, and you're going to take your left hand, reach up over your head, over onto your right side, and gently pull down towards your left shoulder. You're not trying to like push too hard, but I gently pulled down a little bit, and then you gaze your look up to the left. And I held that for a few seconds. And all the while I'm breathing in through my nose, out through my mouth. I also am breathing out longer than I'm breathing in. So I breathed in 4, out 8 every time. So then you come back forward and do the same thing on your right side. Pull your or pull your head down towards your right shoulder and gaze over to the right. So I did this all while breathing in 4, out 8. And it was amazing how quickly, and in between each thing, I was checking my heart rate too. So I could recognize when my heart rate was starting to slow. And it was amazing how those two, actually probably 3, because the breathing in 4, out 8 was part of that too, really is what brought me out of a panic attack. And so I felt empowered. I didn't feel frustrated by that. I was proud of myself for actually going to the top of this giant sand dune. I'm afraid of heights, so I don't know why I thought I could do that, but I'm glad that I thought that I could do that because I will never do it again, but I'm proud of myself for doing that. And also I just felt empowered to know that like I knew my body well enough to recognize what was happening, and I had the skills that I needed to be able to calm myself down, bring my nervous system down, and regulate my body. So that was pretty cool, and definitely wanted to share that with you all because it's part of growth. It's how we get to where we are every step of the way, but also maybe something I shared could help you in a moment where you're feeling super anxious. Okay, so the other story I want to tell you is more of a parenting story, and it's kind of funny. And I definitely am going to throw my husband under the bus, but he told me I could. So I have to tell you, the beginning of this story goes back several years where my husband was putting on a pair of his socks and it had a giant hole in it. And this was actually before we adopted our son. So this was when it was just us and the three girls, and me and my husband and the three girls. And so he had a hole in his sock, and he thought it would be so funny because he had this hole to rip the hole even bigger. And so he put his fingers in and he just ripped. And I almost want to say I think he ripped the sock in half. We all laughed. It was so funny because that's just what he does. He makes us laugh spontaneously. So that happened. Now we fast forward to this last weekend where my husband is putting on a pair of socks onto our son, who um, has a very literal way of looking at the world. So things are very much like if I say, that we only wear boots in the snow, he will only wear boots in the snow. So you have to be very clear about, like if I tell him, oh yeah, you can wear those boots because it's cold outside or rainy, he will be like, no, you told me I can only wear them in the snow. So he's very literal. He also wants to be just like his dad. And so anything that John does, he will do. Anything that John does, he will do. He will tell jokes that John says. He will do the same mannerisms as John. If somebody has laughed or thought it was funny, he will want to do those exact same things. So John is putting these socks on our son, and my son says, these feel a little bit too small for me, and they're not comfortable. And so John thought it would be funny to take those socks, and he wanted to rip them, but he couldn't. So he got out a pair of scissors and he cut them. And the minute that I saw him doing this, I was like, what are you even doing with your life? And he was like, I immediately regret it. But he was committed. And so he, in his mind, thought it was really funny when I ripped my sock in half because it had a hole. It wasn't comfortable. I couldn't wear it. Wouldn't it be funny to do the same? But he quickly realized the audience was different. My son will now think that he can cut socks. And in fact, he even said, I have other socks that are uncomfortable, Dad. And so it was a learning moment that we have to know our kiddos. We have to know in the moment whether this is going to sit right or whether every child is different. And so it was really funny the first time with our girls because they would never think to rip socks or try and cut them. But now we have this added layer of our son is now going to think that he can cut socks. Or I'm even thinking like clothes. We're probably going to have him cutting clothes with scissors because dad did it and dad thought it would be funny. So, we're always learning and growing, and we're going to just go with it. And we tried to explain to him that dad thought it would be funny and it wasn't. But that's when he said, but I have these other socks. So, hopefully it'll sink in at some point, but we just have to give ourselves grace and know that in those moments, it might have been a huge parenting fail, but it wasn't a fail because we learned from it and we know that we will not do those things again, right? Okay. So I hope you enjoyed story time today. Those were just some fun things that I thought I could share with you, and maybe you can learn something from our mistakes. Or actually, the first story was not a mistake. It was pretty amazing, but maybe you can learn something from that for yourself. So that was what I have for you today. I do want to tell you that next week is a question and answer episode, and I'm going to be talking about toddler tantrums. So come back next week for an episode all about toddler tantrums. I had a friend actually text me and ask me some questions about big feelings. And so I thought this would be a great opportunity for a question and answer episode. So that is next week. Come back next week and we will talk about toddlers, all things toddler tantrums. And I will see you guys next week. Have a great sunshiny spring week this week. Bye, friends.